I once wondered whether the sky above me was only a veil of blue, or a trembling doorway into realms far more vast than any mortal eye could bear. And as I walked the narrow roads of Florence in my youth, a question followed me like a shadow. What if the heavens were not one but many, layered like chambers of fire and mist? And what if a man chosen by God had truly crossed them all? This question returns to me now as I speak to you about Enoch, a man whose footsteps rose beyond the stars while his heartbeat still echoed on the earth. And I tell you this not as a scholar of distant lore, but as a pilgrim who has tasted both fear and wonder in the silence of prayer. Because what Enoch saw does not belong to gentle tales told by candlelight. It belongs to the battlefield of the Spirit, where light and darkness contest. Every breath we draw, I ask you then, have you ever paused in your prayer and wondered why the unseen world feels closer than your own pulse? Why certain moments in life tremble with invisible presence? Why temptation presses like a whisper from enemy territory, while comfort sometimes descends like a breath from beyond the veil? Scripture tells us in Genesis that Enoch walked with God and was taken. But the ancient writings preserved among the faithful speak of more than a simple taking. They speak of a journey through 10 heavens, each one more radiant and terrible than the last. And as I recount this journey to you, I feel the weight of it upon my soul, as though I too were climbing those luminous steps with trembling hand. What if I told you that these heavens hold the blueprint of the invisible war shaping your life even now? What if the storms you face are not random trials, but the clash of realms Enoch witnessed with his own eyes? The Apostle Paul declares in the Scriptures that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities in heavenly places. And when I meditate on those words, I see Enoch moving upward across realms where such powers dwell, some in obedient glory, others in chains of rebellion. And I understand why this ancient book unsettles so many, for it does not merely describe paradise, it exposes warfare. As I prepare you for this ascent, I urge you to open your heart with caution, for no soul climbs these heights without confronting its own shadows. The heavens. Enoch crossed are not distant myth, but mirrors of our own spiritual condition. The first heavens reveal our distractions. The second, our temptations. The higher realms, our calling and our courage. And if we dare follow him, we must walk with honesty and surrender. For prayer without surrender is a door that never opens. Think for a moment about your own life, your habits, your fears, the griefs you bury beneath routine. Have you accepted the illusion that the world you see is the only one that matters? Have you lived as though the battle for your soul is merely poetic language and not a real conflict whose weapons are forged in the heavens? When Jesus taught us to pray, your kingdom come, he was not giving us gentle poetry, but a battle plan. A call to invite divine order into enemy territory. And the journey of Enoch shows us what that territory looks like. Today, I invite you to rise with me into this mystery, not as passive listeners, but as warriors of faith, awakening to the truth of the worlds above. Let every word you hear become a weapon against apathy. Let every vision of Enoch become a map for your own ascent. And let this first step awaken within you a hunger for the Holy One who reigns above every heaven. For as we begin this journey together, I challenge you to ask yourself one question. Are you ready to climb? I step from the threshold of the first mystery with the weight of revelation pressing upon my chest. For as I lifted my eyes toward the ascent that awaited me, I sensed the trembling breath of the heavens themselves. And the voice within my soul whispered that no man enters the first heaven unscathed. Because this realm, though nearest to the earth, carries the residue of all human frailty. When I first crossed its boundary, I felt the air thicken with clouds like veils of unspoken prayers. And beneath my feet, currents of wind moved with living intention, as though the breath of God still circled through their paths. For the first heaven is the vault of storms, the cradle of waters, the stage where rain and thunder obey, invisible guardians who stand as watchmen of creation. And as I walked among them, I felt as though my mortal heart was being measured by the rhythm of their wings. These guardians were not the radiant warriors of higher realms. They bore neither sword nor flame. Yet their presence shook me more than the armies I later beheld. For they watched not the movements of stars, but the movements of men. They listened to the anger, the bruise in the human heart, and mirrored it with bursting clouds. They heard the sighs of the weary and answered with gentle rain. And in their silent labor, I realized they were revealing the truth of the soul. That the storms within us shape the storms around us. I saw rivers suspended like silver threads above the world, ready to fall when commanded. And I knew then that creation is never separate from the Creator, but lives in constant dialogue with Him. And yet I also felt the tension of things unseen, for the first heaven bears the mark of warfare more subtle than blades or chains. Here lies the battlefield of distraction, where the enemy whispers not with shouts but with comfort, where he lulls the soul with the illusion that ordinary life is enough, that prayer can be casual, that holiness can be postponed. And as I looked upon the currents swirling through the sky, I saw the weight of human forgetfulness drifting like smoke below. Each puff a life lived without awareness of the holy. I tell you this as a wanderer who has felt the sting of complacency in my own spirit. For the first heaven confronts us with the truth that many who profess faith have never truly awakened from the slumber of the world. They recite holy words, yet walk with eyes closed. They breathe the air of heaven, yet do not discern its fragrance. The scriptures say the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of His hands. And as I beheld the first heaven, I understood the depth of that declaration. For the skies do more than display beauty. They reveal the condition of the soul. They echo the choices of humanity. Every storm that breaks a land often reflects the storms people refuse to face within themselves. Every drought mirrors the dryness of hearts that no longer seek the living water. Every gentle rain mirrors mercy offered but rarely received. So I ask you now, as I once asked myself when I stood trembling beneath that luminous firmament, what storms brew within your own sky? What winds circle through the chambers of your thoughts? What unspoken battle stirs behind your calm appearance? And do you dare to admit that the first heaven is not merely a place above you, but a mirror of the realm within you? As I moved deeper into this airy expanse, I felt the pull of enemy territory lurking among the drifting clouds, not in open hostility, but in quiet influence. For the greatest snare of the first heaven is not terror, but comfort. The comfort of routine, the comfort of spiritual numbness, the comfort of a faith that never rises above habit. And it is here that many souls lose the war before they realize they are in one. The enemy desires that you remain anchored to this lowest realm of your spiritual life, where you pray without fire, worship without awe, and live without hunger for the higher things of God. And so the first heaven becomes the place where the battle for your awakening begins. I realized then that ascending the heavens was not only a journey upward, but a battle inward. For every step demanded surrender of something familiar, something small, something earthly. And as the wind swirled around me, I felt the whisper of the Spirit urging me to rise, leave behind complacency, and step into the fierce clarity of God. So I implore you, as one who has tasted the breath of the heavens, do not allow your soul to settle in the lowest realm. Do not let distraction become your master. Do not let the storms within remain unchallenged. For the first heaven is your training ground, your proving place, your call to arms. And if you cannot conquer complacency here, you will never rise to the realms of glory that await. Lift your eyes, strengthen your spirit, sharpen your prayer, and stand firm. For the ascent has only just begun, and the first heaven has given you your first command. Awaken. I entered the second heaven with a trembling that no mortal language can fully contain. For the air itself felt heavier, as though every breath I drew was weighed upon scales of judgment. and the light that guided me through the first realm dimmed into a cold shimmer like moonlight falling upon iron chains. And in that pale glow I sensed that I'd crossed into enemy territory where remnants of ancient rebellion still echo through the corridors of eternity. As I stepped further, a darkness rose before me, not like the gentle darkness of night, but a sentient shadow, a presence woven from centuries of anguish and defiance, and it pressed upon my spirit with a force that made my heart tighten. Here in this second realm dwell the watchers who abandoned their posts in ages long past, those who looked upon the daughters of men and chose desire over duty, those who traded the radiance of obedience for the curse of corruption. And when I beheld them, I felt the cold truth of sin in its unmasked form. They were bound not by earthly chains, but by chains of judgment forged by the command of the Most High. Chains that glowed faintly with the memory of divine fire. And their forms, though once glorious, had become twisted reflections of the rebellion that consumed them. Some knelt in despair, others stared with hollow eyes that no longer wept. And a few still trembled as though waiting for a verdict already sealed. Their presence carried a terror deeper than physical pain, for it revealed how far a soul can fall when it turns away from the holiness of God. As I moved through their prison, I heard whispers like wind passing through stone. And those whispers spoke of choices, of pride, of the subtle beginnings of spiritual ruin. And I realized that the second heaven is not merely a chamber of punishment, but a mirror of the temptations that stalk every believer. The scriptures say that even angels fell when they chose their own will above the will of God. And as I considered this, I felt the truth pierce me. If being shaped from celestial fire could fall so far, who among us dares to treat temptation lightly? I think of your own life. Think of the quiet moments when compromise whispers to your heart. The small decisions that seem harmless, the secret thoughts you refuse to confront. Do you imagine that the enemy requires a great sin to pull you downward? No. He requires only the smallest surrender, the slightest turning of the heart, the tiny seed of willfulness that grows into rebellion. The fallen ones I beheld did not begin in chains. They began with a thought, a désir, an unguarded moment, and now their eternity is a monument to the cost of choosing darkness. As I continued walking deeper into this realm, I felt the full weight of spiritual warfare pressing against me. It was not the roar of battle, but the slow suffocation of despair, the sense that hope is fragile and holiness unattainable. And it struck me that many souls on earth live under the shadow of this second heaven without realizing it. Depression, addiction, bitterness, secret, sin. All these are chains forged from the same rebellion that binds the fallen watchers. And yet people walk daily in these invisible shackles, believing they are powerless to break free. But hear me now. For in this realm of darkness, I discovered a truth as sharp as a blade. The second heaven may reveal the power of sin, but it also reveals the greater power of deliverance. For though the fallen angels are bound beyond redemption, the children of God are not. When Jesus taught us to pray, lead us not into temptation, he was not giving us a gentle request, but equipping us with a weapon, a battle plan for navigating the shadows without becoming captive to them. As I stood among the chained watchers, I felt the Spirit burn within me with the certainty that no temptation holds authority over a soul surrendered to God. The chains of this realm cannot bind the one who walks in the light, and the whispers of despair cannot silence the voice of truth. Yet the question remains, do you live as though you are at war? Or do you drift through life unaware that the enemy studies your weaknesses more closely than you study your own? Do you treat temptation as a passing nuisance or as a doorway to bondage? Do you pray for deliverance with conviction or with indifference? I tell you, the second heaven is not far from any of us. For every moment of temptation is a brush with the same darkness that swallowed the watchers. Every hidden sin is a chain waiting to lock. Every unguarded thought is a seed of rebellion. As I turned to leave that dreadful realm, I felt the gaze of the watchers upon me not with hatred, but with a sorrow that chilled the marrow of my soul. And I knew their captivity existed, not to terrify us, but to warn us, to remind us that no one drifts into holiness by accident and no one escapes bondage without battle. So I call to you now as a fellow pilgrim, strengthen your heart, guard your thoughts, sharpen your prayer, and do not underestimate the enemy who once deceived angels. For if you hope to rise into the higher heavens, you must first triumph here, in the realm where temptation is born and rebellion begins. Stand firm, for the ascent continues and the third heaven awaits. Before I stepped into the third heaven, I felt the air grow still around me as though creation itself was holding its breath. And when the veil opened before my eyes, I understood why. For no realm I had seen carried such a terrible and radiant duality. The third heaven is not a single landscape, but two worlds bound together, light and judgment, paradise and dread. And as I entered it, I felt my spirit pulled between awe and trembling. A garden stretched before me, unlike any garden of earth. Its trees shimmered as though woven from living emerald. Its waters glowed with a purity that seemed to sing, and every leaf moved as if stirred not by wind but by the breath of God. This was Eden, the garden planted in the beginning, not lost, but preserved beyond the corruption of the earth. Guarded and alive, awaiting the restoration spoken by prophets and promised in Scripture. I walked beside a river clear as glass and saw beneath its surface reflections of glory, not my own. For the beauty of this realm did not flatter the beholder, it exposed the true condition of the soul. Yet even as I marveled at this paradise, a shadow rose on the horizon. Not the shadow of sin, but the shadow of judgment. And the same voice that had guided my ascent whispered that the third heaven holds both reward and reckoning. When I turned toward the darker expanse, I beheld a place where the souls of the unrighteous waited in anguish, a place of fire that did not consume but revealed, a place where deeds done in secret emerged like blazing inscriptions for all the realms to see. The third heaven is the realm where justice and mercy stand side by side, a realm that reveals what humanity has forgotten, that holiness is not a gentle suggestion, but the pulse of the universe. Here I understood the words of the apostle, that God is not mocked, and whatever a man sows, he will reap. For the very soil beneath my feet cried out with the truth that no action is ever insignificant. I saw a figure near the border of the garden, his tears falling like sparks into the ground. And though he was not condemned, his soul was being purified by the memory of choices that had wounded others. In this realm, even repentance has fire, not to destroy, but to refine. And I knew then why so many spiritual battles begin within the heart. For the soul is shaped by the choices it refuses to confront. As I moved deeper into the garden, a warm brilliance enveloped me, and I sensed the presence of those who had lived faithfully in the world below. Not perfect, but surrendered, their garments radiant with the mercy of God. Some rested by the rivers of delight, others lifted their voices in praise, and their peace was so profound that my own spirit ached with longing. Yet even in this glory I remembered the shadow I had seen moments earlier. And I felt the weight of the truth. Paradise is real, but so is judgment. Our reward is real, but so is consequence. And so I ask you, as I ask myself while standing in that trembling realm, which side of the third heaven reflects your life today? Do you walk toward the waters of delight or toward the fires of regret? Do your choices draw you into the garden or toward the abyss? Do you treat holiness as a distant ideal or as the breath your soul was created to breathe? Many live believing that God's grace excuses the darkness they cling to. But grace was never permission. Grace is power. Grace is transformation. Grace is the weapon that breaks chains of bondage and opens the gates to Eden's light. And the third heaven reveals this truth without mercy for illusions. Think of your thoughts, your habits, your secret motives, the small resentments you hold, the hidden desires you allow to grow. These are seeds that will either bloom in light or ignite in judgment. For nothing remains neutral when weighed in the scales of eternity. As I gazed upon the boundary where paradise met purifying fire, I felt the battle within myself sharpen, for every soul carries both light and shadow, both hunger for God and temptation toward the world. And the third heaven does not lie about this conflict. It magnifies it. The scriptures speak of a tree of life and a tree of knowledge. And in this realm, I understood the deeper meaning. Every day, we feed from one or the other. Every choice nourishes life or nourishes death. And the heavens witness all. So I challenge you now with the same urgency that pierced me in that sacred realm. Examine your heart. Confront what you avoid. Surrender what you cling to. For the third heaven stands not only as a promise, but as a warning. The garden awaits those who walk in truth. The fire awaits whatever truth we refuse to face. And the journey upward demands that we choose whom we will serve. Strengthen your spirit, purify your steps, and rise with holy resolve. For the ascent continues, and the fourth heaven calls you forward. I felt the ascent shift beneath my feet as I approached the fourth heaven, for the air itself shimmered like a veil of dawn caught between two worlds. And when the gate opened before me, I understood that I had entered the realm where time is carved, measured, and commanded by the hand of the Most High. Here the sky was not sky as mortals know it, but a vast cathedral of moving light, where great wheels of radiance turned with perfect harmony, each rotation echoing across the realms below. As I stepped forward, the brilliance of two mighty orbs filled my vision, the sun blazing like a living flame, crowned with golden breath, and the moon glowing with gentle silver that soothed the trembling of my soul. Yet these were not the distant bodies I once observed from Florence's hills, cold and unreachable. No, here they moved like royal chariots, driven by angels of unimaginable stature. Their faces, solemn, their eyes fixed upon the pathways set for them since the dawn of creation. I saw the sun carried by a host of radiant beings whose wings burned with white fire, and each of them held inscriptions across their garments that shone like molten gold. Inscriptions that mark the times and seasons of the earth, the rise and fall of days, the beginning and end of harvests, the measure of years known to man, and the hidden cycles known only to heaven. The moon too was escorted by its own guardians, softer in radiance, yet fierce in purpose. Their wings shimmering like frost, lit by morning light. Their voices murmuring melodies that guided tides, growth, and the secret rhythms of living creatures. As I watched the movements of these celestial legions, I felt the arrogance of humanity crumble within me. For in the world below, we imagine time to be our possession, something we command, something we spend and waste as though it belonged to us. But in this realm, time stood revealed as a sacred order, a structure forged by God himself, carried by angels, guarded with fierce precision, and granted to humanity only by mercy. I understood then the meaning of the psalmist when he wrote that the heavens declare the glory of God and the skies proclaim his handiwork. For in this fourth heaven the declaration was not spoken. It was lived, zung, enacted by beings whose obedience sustained the turning of days. And as I gazed at the great wheels of light above me, I sensed the weight of the question that every soul must one day confront. What have you done with the time given to you? Many live as though time is an infinite well, as though each sunrise promises another, as though repentance can be postponed and holiness delayed. But here in the fourth heaven, the truth burned like fire. Every hour is a gift. Every morning, a mercy. Every evening, a summons to examine the work of the day. I saw scrolls suspended in the air, glowing with shifting light, and understood that they recorded the movements of the sun and moon across the earth. Their influence upon nations, the rise of kings, the fall of empires, the famine that humbles the proud, the rain that restores the faithful, and the silent seasons when God calls his people to remember him. The angels carried these scrolls with reverence, and I realized that time is not merely the progression of moments, but the framework within which God shapes the destiny of humanity. Then the Spirit whispered into my soul with a force that pierced me. The fourth heaven is the realm of discipline, alignment, and holy order. And no soul can rise higher until it learns to walk in the order God has established. Think of your own life. How many days slip through your hands consumed by trivial pursuits? How many mornings pass without prayer? How many nights stretch long with worries that bear no fruit? How often do you rush through the hours as though each one is not a battlefield where victory or defeat is decided? The scriptures declare that to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. And in this realm I saw that truth engraved upon the very light that filled the sky. I understood that spiritual growth does not happen in chaos, but in order, not in hurried fragments, but in deliberate surrender, not in unchecked impulse, but in disciplined devotion. And so I ask you now, as I once asked myself when the turning lights of the fourth heaven shone upon me, are you a steward of time or a prisoner of it? Do you command your days with prayer and purpose, or do they command you? Do you walk in alignment with the divine rhythm, or do you drift through the hours without intention? Many souls remain trapped in the lower heavens, not because they lack desire, but because they lack discipline. Not because they are incapable, but because they refuse to align their lives with the holy order established by God. If you are to rise, you must learn to master your time, not by your own strength, but by surrender. For discipline in the kingdom is not self-exaltation, but self-offering. The laying down of hurried chaos for the peace of divine order. As I prepared to leave the fourth heaven, I felt its final lesson press upon me like a seal. Time is not your enemy. It is your battleground, your teacher, your sacred instrument. And the one who masters it will climb higher into the realms where chaos cannot dwell. So strengthen your resolve, sanctify your routines, guard your mornings, purify your nights, and walk with the awareness that every hour is a weapon against darkness. The ascent continues, and the fifth heaven awaits the soldier who is ready. I had barely recovered from the weight of the fourth heaven when the path before me hardened into a brilliance so fierce it felt like stepping into the heartbeat of a storm. And as I crossed the threshold of the fifth heaven, I sensed immediately that this was no realm of quiet contemplation, but a fortress, a citadel forged for war. The air itself throbbed like a distant drum, each pulse shaking through my spirit with the cadence of marching armies. And the sky above me burned with a deep blue fire that flickered like the edge of a divine blade. Here there was no gentle breeze, not serene radiance, only the sharp clarity of a battlefield that has existed since the dawn of rebellion. I stood upon a plain vast as eternity, and stretching far into the horizon were ranks of warriors unlike anything the lower heavens had revealed. They bore no weariness, nor hesitation. Their bodies forged from light, so concentrated it cut through the air like heat over iron. Their eyes steady with holy resolve, and across their chests burned inscriptions of power that no tongue of earth could fully speak. They were angels of warfare, guardians of the divine order, and as they moved, the very ground trembled beneath their steps. I saw in their hands weapons fashioned not from metal, but from pure purpose, blades shaped from obedience, shields forged from unwavering faithfulness, and spears that gleam with the fire of divine judgment. Each weapon radiated its own note of power, forming a symphony of holy might that filled the sky like thunder. These were the armies that stand against the darkness that spreads through the realms, the soldiers who wage war against principalities and powers, the hosts who intercept the schemes of the enemy before they can reach the earth below. And when I beheld them, I felt a truth ignite within my chest. The spiritual warfare that humans often treat as metaphor is lived here with absolute reality. The apostle wrote that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God. And here in the fifth heaven, those weapons stood revealed in their true form, glowing, alive, and perfectly aligned with the will of the Most High. As I walked among these warriors, I felt exposed, as though every weakness in my spirit were laid bare before their unwavering gaze. Not to condemn, but to measure, they looked upon me not as a stranger, but as a soldier, still in training, one who must learn what true warfare requires. And I confess to you now that their silence taught me more than any sermon I have heard on earth. For in their presence, I understood that victory in the Spirit is not won by passion alone, but by discipline, surrender, vigilance, and unwavering allegiance to God. Suddenly the ground beneath us quaked as though struck by a hammer from the deep, and the army shifted into formation without a single word spoken. A darkness appeared on the horizon, a moving shadow, a distortion that crackled like burning ash. And though it did not cross into the fifth heaven, I sensed its hostility. This was the strategy of the enemy, subtle yet sinister, forever probing the borders, forever searching for weakness, forever scheming against the people of God. And the warriors of the fifth heaven stood as the barrier, the line drawn by the hand of the Almighty, the host that refuses to allow darkness to pass unchallenged. In that moment, I realized a profound truth. The battles we face in prayer, in temptation, in grief, in doubt, are reflections of battles waged here with power beyond human understanding. When you pray, forces move here. When you worship, weapons ignite. When you surrender to God, reinforcements rise. When you resist temptation, enemy ground is seized. But when you grow numb, when you abandon prayer, when you yield to darkness, the enemy gains an opening, and the warriors of this realm must fight all the harder on your behalf. And so I ask you now, with the fire of this heaven burning behind my words, are you fighting your battles or abandoning them? Are you praying with the force of someone who knows they are at war? Or are your prayers mere routine, whispered without urgency, while the enemy wages war against your peace, your purpose, your family, your destiny? Think of the struggles you face, the temptations that return like familiar whispers, the discouragement that weighs like a stone on your chest, the anger that flares without warning, the fear that steals your courage. These are not random feelings. They are the front lines of a war waged against your soul. And the question the fifth heaven presses upon every believer is this: will you rise as a warrior or fall as a bystander? The angels here do not fight alone. They respond to the cries of the faithful. They align with those who stand firm in truth. They strengthen those who resist the enemy with prayer and obedience. If you refuse to fight, you surrender territory you were meant to claim. If you pray without conviction, you wield a dull blade. If you live without holiness, you step into the battlefield unarmored. As I watched the warriors shift in their radiant ranks, a fierce longing filled me, not the longing for glory, but the longing to be worthy of the calling placed upon every child of God. The calling to stand, to resist, to fight the good fight with courage rooted not in self, but in the strength of the Almighty. And as the armies lifted their weapons, the sky erupted in a blaze of light that struck my spirit with a single command: rise, rise from complacency, rise from fear, rise from spiritual slumber, rise from every chain that binds your resolve. For the fifth heaven does not call the strong, it shapes them, and the battles awaiting you on earth cannot be won without the fire that burns here. Prepare yourself, sharpen your prayer, or strengthen your spirit. For the ascent continues, and the sixth heaven awaits those who are ready to be examined. I felt a solemn hush fall over me as I entered the sixth heaven, a realm where the air shimmered like liquid wisdom and the silence carried the weight of eternity. Here there were no battle cries, not blazing weapons, no thundering wings, as in the fifth heaven. Instead, there was a stillness so profound it felt as though every sound in creation had paused to listen. And in that stillness I sensed the nearness of truth. Truth so precise that no mortal conscience could escape its gaze. Before me rose great halls carved not from stone or light but from understanding itself. And within these halls stood countless beings of radiant clarity, whose eyes shone with a depth that pierced through thought and motive alike. These were the recorders of heaven, the Stephanim who hold the chronicles of all creation. And as I stepped into their realm, I felt the gravity of being known completely and without refuge. Their garments glowed with shifting patterns that resembled living script, lines of fire that curled and unfolded like the pages of a divine archive. And I realized that every flicker of light on their robes was a memory, a vid, a thought recorded with absolute accuracy. Above them floated scrolls vast as the sky, some sealed, some open, each glowing with a radiance that pulsed like a heartbeat. These scrolls contained the stories of nations, the intentions of rulers, the hidden sins of tyrants, the quiet faithfulness of the humble, and the secret prayers of the righteous. Each word written within them was alive, sharp and incorruptible. I understood at once that nothing escapes this realm, not a whisper of cruelty, not a breath of love, not a moment of temptation resisted, and not a single tear shed in hidden devotion. Every act is witnessed, every motive is weighed, every choice is engraved. And the truth struck me with greater force than any weapon of the fifth heaven. The sixth heaven is where the soul is measured. The scriptures say that books will be opened and the dead judged according to what is written. And here I saw those books with my own eyes. Living testimonies that cannot be altered by excuses or forgotten by time. As I walked deeper into the archives, I felt memories from my own life rise within me. Moments I had long dismissed or buried, and in the light of this heaven they appeared not as scattered fragments, but as threads of a single tapestry, each one contributing to the pattern of who I had become. Some threads glowed with mercy, others darkened with selfishness, and I stood trembling before the truth that heaven remembers what we try so hard to forget. I tell you now, with the weight of this revelation still burning in my spirit, the sixth heaven confronts you not with punishment, but with reality. It holds a mirror to your soul and refuses to let you look away. Think of your thoughts, the ones you never speak aloud. Think of your intentions. The ones you justify, though, you know they are crooked. Think of your compromises. The ones you call small, though, they change the course of your heart. The recorders of this realm capture all of it, not to condemn you, but to call you upward. For the light that measures also heals, and the truth that exposes also transforms. As I stood among the chronicles of heaven, a gentle but unyielding presence came over me, and the Spirit whispered to the deepest part of my being, what you conceal will break you. What you confess will free you. I understood then that the sixth heaven is not only a realm of records, but a realm of repentance. The place where the soul learns that honesty is a weapon against darkness. Many believers live with divided hearts, speaking of faith while hiding bitterness, reciting prayers while nurturing secret sins, pursuing holiness while protecting pride. And they wonder why their ascent falters, why their prayers feel hollow, why their peace crumbles under the slightest pressure. The reason is written plainly in the light of this realm. You cannot rise with burdens. You refuse to release. You cannot grow while guarding what is killing you. You cannot walk in truth while clinging to shadows. So I ask you now, with the solemnity of the sixth heaven echoing behind my words, what is written about you today? What chapter are you authoring with your choices? What legacy are you inscribing with your habits? What verdict are you shaping with your thoughts? If the chronicle of your life were opened before you at this very moment, would you rejoice or tremble? The beauty of this heaven is that the story is not finished. The pen has not left the page. The light has not closed the scroll. You can still rewrite the next line. You can still choose humility over pride, honesty over hiding, discipline over indulgence, surrender over rebellion. You can still step into the mercy of God and let the fire of His truth refine what has long been concealed. As I prepared to leave this realm, the archivists lifted their heads, and for a moment their eyes met mine with a compassion that struck me like a blade of light. They were not keepers of condemnation, but guardians of remembrance, calling every soul to rise into holiness. And as the gates to the seventh heaven opened before me, I carried their message like a seal upon my heart. Live with nothing hidden. Walk with nothing false. Rise with nothing unconfessed. For the ascent continues, and the realm of glory awaits those who dare to be true. I felt the atmosphere change as I crossed from the sixth heaven into the seventh, for the stillness of record and remembrance gave way to a rising heat that shimmered like the breath of creation's very heart. And as I stepped forward, my spirit trembled with a mixture of awe and dread. This realm was alive with intensity, a radiance so fierce it felt as though every unworthy thought within me was being burned away simply by standing in its light. If the lower heavens revealed truth, this one revealed holiness, raw and unfiltered, and no soul passes through it without confronting the fire of the Almighty. Before me rose towering beings whose forms were not shaped by gentle luminescence, but by blazing glory that pulsed like molten gold. Their wings were vast, layered with countless feathers of burning white, and every movement they made sent waves of heat across the realm that shook the foundations beneath my feet. These were not warriors as in the fifth heaven, nor archivists as in the sixth. These were the holy ones who stand nearest to the throne of God, but the keepers of purity, the guardians of divine presence, the watchers of glory, whose very voices can split mountains if they choose to speak, yet they did not speak. Their silence alone declared the weight of eternity. I watched as they lifted their faces toward a distant radiance that burned brighter than 1,000 suns, and I knew instinctively that the source of that light was the threshold of the eighth heaven. The glory that spilled from it washed over the seventh like lightning softened by mercy, and I felt the pull of it in my bone. But the holy ones did not move, for their station was not beyond this realm. Their purpose was here, purifying everything that approaches the higher glory, burning away every remnant of darkness that cannot survive the presence of God. As I walked deeper, the air thickened with living fire. Not the fire that destroys, but the fire that transforms. And with each step, memories rose from my heart like sparks. Moments of pride I had ignored, words spoken in haste, wounds I had inflicted on others without apology. These memories burned not as punishment, but as revelation. And I understood that holiness is not merely moral purity, but total alignment with the heart of God. Here, the scriptures I had known since childhood took on a new weight. The call to be holy, as He is holy, was no longer an instruction, but a necessity, for no soul can rise higher without becoming fire itself. The seventh heaven does not ask whether you have avoided sin. It asks whether you have surrendered completely, whether you have allowed the Holy One to burn away everything false within you. I tell you now with trembling honesty, this heaven confronts you with the distance between who you are and who you were created to be. It strips away your excuses, your defense, your justifications, until only the truth remains. And yet in that truth I felt not condemnation but invitation, the burning desire of God to refine His people into vessels capable of carrying His light. Think of your own life. Think of the corners of your heart where bitterness hides, the thoughts you entertain when no one sees, the pride that rises when you feel threatened, the desires you feed in secret, the words you rehearse in anger, the unforgiveness you clutch as though it protects you. These are the impurities that keep a soul trapped in the lower heavens. These are the shadows that prevent a believer from rising into true power. These are the weights that holiness seeks to remove. And holiness is not a gentle request. Holiness is a fire. Here in the seventh heaven, I learned that the enemy does not fear your knowledge, nor your intentions, nor your declarations. It fears your holiness. For holiness is the armor that darkness cannot penetrate, the atmosphere in which demons suffocate, the power that transforms prayer from ritual into weapon. A holy believer is a terror to hell. So I ask you, with the urgency of this realm burning behind my words, have you allowed God to refine you? Or do you cling to the sins that comfort you? Have you surrendered your habits, your wounds, your hidden desires? Or do you keep them like treasures, telling yourself you will release them another day? The seventh heaven whispers a warning that echoes like thunder. The delay of repentance is the chain of captivity. As I stood among the burning ones, a single truth pressed itself upon my spirit with such intensity that I felt my knees weaken. Purity is not perfection. Purity is surrender. Perfection seeks glory for itself, but surrender seeks the glory of God. And the holy ones of this realm are not flawless because of their strength, but because of their submission. They shine because they have allowed God to purge everything within them that does not belong to Him. When the fire of this realm touched the edge of my soul, I felt the weight of every unoffered part of my heart. And I cried out, not in fear, but in longing. Longing to be changed. Longing to be aligned with the Holy One. Longing to rise without the burden of what held me down. And as I stepped toward the gate that led into the eighth heaven, a whisper moved through the burning air. A whisper, not of a voice, but of a presence. Rise purifiet, rise sorenod, rise aulame. For only the heart that has passed through fire can endure the mysteries that lie ahead. And the ascent continues for those willing to be made new. I entered the eighth heaven as one steps into the hidden engine of creation, for the air itself vibrated with a hum so profound. It felt like the pulse of God moving through every strand of existence. And as I crossed its threshold, I realized that the realms below had shown me judgment, order, warfare, and holiness. But this realm revealed something deeper. The architecture reality itself. There was no sun here, no moon, no stars. Yet the entire expanse glowed with a soft radiance like the inside of a living pearl. And woven through this light were currents of energy that twisted and flowed like rivers of molten glass, forming patterns that shifted and reformed in perfect harmony. These were not mere lights, but principles, laws, blueprints of divine intention, the unseen structures that uphold every world, every season, every breath. I saw vast orbs rotating with deliberate grace, not celestial bodies but spiritual engines, governing mysteries too deep for mortal reasoning. Cycles of life, patterns of renewal, tides of influence that shape nations and guide the destiny of generations. Around these orbs move beings so refined in glory that they appeared almost transparent, as though their bodies were made of thought itself. Angels whose purpose was not to fight, nor record, nor purify, but to steward the laws that hold creation together. Guardians of order who ensure that nothing in the universe strays from the mathematical music set by the voice of God. Their movements were fluid, synchronized, each motion sending a ripple through the realm that echoed all the way down to the mortal world, affecting winds, seasons, hearts, and histories. In their hands they carried strands of glowing thread that they wove into the great tapestry suspended in the center of the realm. A tapestry vast as infinity, its patterns shifting as though alive, each thread a soul, a destiny, a consequence, a prayer answered or delayed, a choice made in silence or in agony. And as I drew near it, I felt a trembling rise within me, for the tapestry responded to my presence, threads shifting, revealing the impact of my own life upon others, echoes of moments I never imagined mattered, waves of influence, long forgotten yet still alive. The scriptures say that all things hold together in him, and here I saw that truth in motion. Every atom upheld by intention, every moment carried by design, every life interwoven with countless others. I understood then that nothing is accidental, not the birth of a child, nor the fall of a leaf, not the kindness offered to a stranger, nor the bitterness left unresolved. Everything is part of a pattern, older than the stars. And in this revelation I felt both comfort and fear. Comfort in knowing that I am not wandering through chaos. Fear in realizing that every choice pulls a thread that touches 1,000 unseen others. Many believers imagine their lives isolated, their choices private, their struggles insignificant, but in this realm the illusion of isolation vanished. For I saw that no action is without echo, no decision without influence. And so I ask you now, with the trembling wisdom of this realm burning in my spirit, what threads are you pulling today? Do your words weave healing or fracture? Do your habits strengthen light or feed darkness? Do your hidden thoughts ripple with faith or poison the pattern with despair? You may think your life is small, but in the eighth heaven nothing is small. Your prayers move rivers, your faith shifts cycles, your obedience opens pathways for generations not yet born. I saw angels adjusting threads of nations, the consequences of wars, the rise and fall of civilizations. And as they worked, they did not labor in haste, but in sacred stillness. For they understood that power requires precision, and precision requires surrender to the one who sees the entire tapestry. Then the Spirit whispered to me with a clarity that shook my soul. Align yourself with the pattern of God, or you will tear the pattern of your own destiny. And I understood that disobedience is not merely sin. It is sabotage, an act of tearing at the threads that uphold us, an attempt to rewrite what only God can write. But obedience is creation. It is partnership with the divine architect, the act of weaving light into the world. As I prepared to leave the eighth heaven, I felt its wisdom wrap around me like a mantle, a reminder that every breath I take is part of something eternal, that my life is a thread in the masterpiece of God. And as the gateway to the ninth heaven opened before me, I carry this truth like a blade of clarity in my spirit. Walk with intention, live with awareness, choose with eternity in mind, for the ascent continues and the realm where prayer becomes power awaits. I crossed into the ninth heaven as one steps into the chamber where prayers are weighed, answered, or transformed. For the moment I entered this realm, I felt waves of sound rise around me like the breath of countless souls crying out to God across the ages. And yet these were not sounds made of air, but of spirit. Vibrations that shimmered like threads of light, each carrying a plea, a question, a confession, a battle cry. The entire realm pulsed with these living currents, and as they moved, they wove themselves into patterns that rose upward toward a brilliance too fierce for the mortal mind to endure. Here in the ninth heaven, the distance between heaven and earth collapses, for this is the realm where prayers are gathered, examined, strengthened, and sent upward toward the throne. And as I stepped deeper, I felt the truth burn into me, that every whisper uttered in faith reaches this place. Every sigh spoken in sorrow, every groan of the weary, every halting cry of a sinner seeking mercy, every declaration of a warrior standing against darkness, all rise into this realm like arrows of fire. Angels move through these rivers of prayer with a grace beyond description, their bodies glimmering like crystal forged in lightning, and in their hands they carried bowls that shone with golden brilliance. I recognize them by the scriptures that speak of bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And here they stood in their true form, gathering the cries of humanity, adding to them the fragrance of divine compassion, and lifting them with reverence toward the gates of glory above. But not all prayers rose with equal strength. Some glowed with crimson fire, forged in deep surrender, shaped by broken hearts and burning trust. Others shimmered with silver light, woven from thanksgiving and worship. Still others flickered weakly, pale and trembling, weighed down by doubt. Spoken without conviction, prayers offered not from battle, but from habit. And the angels touched each one with a discernment that pierced me to the core. For they were not measuring eloquence. They were measuring surrender, humility, faith. It is written that the fervent prayer of the righteous is powerful and effective. And here I saw that power in motion, prayers blazing like meteors as they shot upward, splitting the darkness, wounding the enemy, shifting the future. I felt the heat of these prayers against my face as they passed by. And in that moment I understood with terrifying clarity that prayer is not a ritual. It is warfare. Every prayer is a weapon. Every prayer is a declaration. Every prayer is a strike against the kingdom of darkness. And I trembled at the thought of how many souls pray as though they are whispering into emptiness, unaware of the battle ignited by their words. Then I saw another river, darker and heavier, a current of prayers that never rose. These were prayers spoken without faith, prayers poisoned by bitterness, prayers demanded rather than surrendered, prayers uttered while clinging to sin, prayers of lips not aligned with heart. They drifted in stagnant pools until angels touched them with sorrow and carried them aside. Not discarded, but held in waiting until the heart that spoke them was truly ready to change. For God hears everything, but he responds to what is surrendered. I felt a trembling rise within my soul when I saw prayers that had been delayed for years suddenly ignite with new fire as the heart of the one who prayed finally turned toward obedience. A prayer is never forgotten. It waits for you to align with it. And then I witnessed something that shook me deeper than any sight on this ascent. A single prayer, small and frail, spoken by someone in despair, rose upward like a broken feather. It wavered, dim and trembling, but then a second prayer rose beside it, spoken by someone miles away, interceding without knowing why. And then a third and a fourth. And as these prayers intertwined, the small one ignited, bursting into flame until it soared upward with such force that even the angels bowed as it passed. Intercession is multiplication. What one believer cannot lift alone, the fellowship of saints can carry like a rising storm. And so I ask you with holy urgency, what prayers are you sending into this realm? What weapons are you forging with your words? Are your prayers rising like arrows of fire or falling like empty echoes? Do you pray with the confidence of one who knows heaven, listens? Or with the resignation of someone hoping against hope? When you pray for your family, your city, your hidden wounds, your secret battles, do you speak as a warrior or as a wanderer? The ninth heaven bears witness to the truth that prayer is not a quiet practice, but an act of war. A strike against the enemy, a summons to heaven's armies, a declaration that you refuse to surrender the territory God has called you to claim. As I prepared to ascend toward the final heaven, I felt the weight of this realm settle upon me like armor. And the Spirit whispered with a fire that shook every corner of my being. Pray with purpose. Pray with fire. Pray with surrender. For the ninth heaven receives only what the heart truly offers. The ascent continues, and the 10th heaven awaits with glory that will undo you and remake you. I entered the 10th heaven as though stepping into the core of all existence. For the moment the veil parted. A torrent of light flooded over me with such force that every thought I carried shattered like glass. And for a breathless instant, I felt as though my very being dissolved into the brilliance that surrounded me. No realm below had prepared me for this. Not the fire of the 7th, not the warfare of the 5th, not the trembling order of the 4th. For this light was not merely illumination. It was identity, power, holiness, origin. It was the presence of the Most High. Yet even here the glory did not strike me as a single overwhelming blaze, but as waves, depths, endless layers of radiance that pulsed like the heartbeat of eternity. And within that radiance I sensed the nearness of the throne, a presence so absolute that the smallest shadow of pride or deception would have annihilated me instantly. I saw beings around the throne whose forms were beyond form, creatures of pure light, wheels within wheels, eyes like living stars, wings covered in fire, and each movement they made echoed through the fabric of creation, their voices rising in ceaseless praise that shook the pillars of existence. These were the seraphim, the closest to the Almighty, and their song carried a truth so fierce it carved itself into my soul. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord, whose glory fills every heaven. But even their radiance paled before the brilliance that emanated from the center of the realm. And though no mortal tongue can describe it, I will speak what my trembling spirit perceived. A throne that was not a throne, a presence that was not contained, a brilliance that did not shine outward but drew everything inward. The source of life, the architect of time, the judge of nations, the lover of souls, and before this throne stood one who shone like polished bronze burning in a furnace, his face brighter than the sun, his voice like many waters. The Son of Man, the Word made flesh, and the moment I beheld him, I felt every part of my being bend in surrender, for I understood that every heaven I had climbed led to him. Every battle, every purification, every revelation, all of it was drawing me closer to the one who holds the keys of death and life. The Alpha and Omega, the Lamb and the Lion, the center of all creation. When his eyes fell upon me, I felt not condemnation but exposure, as though he saw every hidden corner of my soul, every fear I had carried, every wound I had buried, every sin I had confessed, and every sin I had ignored. And with that gaze, he unraveled me until nothing remained but truth. And the truth was this: I was loved with a ferocity I had never imagined. That love struck me harder than any judgment I feared, for it was not gentle affection but consuming fire, the kind that refuses to leave a soul half surrendered. And I realized then that every heaven I climbed was not testing my strength but stripping my defenses, removing every excuse I had used to avoid the total surrender the Almighty requires. The throne does not ask for part of you, it demands all. Here in the 10th heaven I saw the histories of nations unfold like scrolls of fire, empires rising and collapsing according to the justice of God, kings exalted or humbled by the movement of his hand, and the prayers of his people shaping destinies more than armies ever could. I saw judgments held back for the sake of the righteous and blessings delayed because of rebellion. And I understood that nothing in the world below escapes his sight. Every injustice will face correction. Every faithful act will be rewarded. Every hidden sin will be exposed. Every sacrifice made in obedience will echo forever. And then the Spirit whispered to me a truth as sharp as a blade. The throne reveals not only who God is, but who you were created to become. For as I looked upon the King, I realized that holiness is not merely a command, it is a destiny, that we were created not for survival but for glory, to reflect the light that radiates from his presence, to walk in obedience that transforms the world, to live with courage, rooted not in our strength but in his authority. Think of your life now, your fears, your doubt, your battles, your prayers whispered through tears. Think of how small you feel when faced with the weight of the world. And hear this truth with the thunder of the 10th heaven. You were not made for smallness. You were made to carry the fire of God. You were made to stand as a warrior of light. You were made to ascend above the sin that clings to you and the lies that bind you. You were made to reflect the one who sits upon the throne. But the throne does not transform spectators. It transforms the surrendered. So I ask you now, with the full weight of this realm burning behind my words, what will you lay down? What will you surrender? What chains will you break? What altars will you rebuild? What battles will you finally face? For the King is calling you upward, not into comfort, but into purpose, not into ease, but into power, not into passivity, but into destiny. And as the light of the throne wrapped around me like a mantle, I heard the call that echoes through every heaven. Rise, 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 for the ascent is not finished. The transformation is not complete. And the journey into eternity has only begun. I descended from the brilliance of the 10th heaven, carrying a weight that was not burden but awakening. For the glory I beheld did not release me gently. It reshaped me. And as I stood at the threshold where the ascent ends and the commissioning begins, I understood that no soul encounters the throne and remains the same. The journey through the 10 heavens was not a tour of wonders, but a revelation of responsibility, a blueprint for living in a world where unseen wars shape visible lives. And as I looked back upon the realms I had crossed, I felt their truths burn within me like living commandments. The first heaven had shown me the subtle battles of distraction, the storms within the human heart that determine whether one even begins the climb. The second revealed the terror of rebellion and the chains forged by compromise. The third exposed the eternal divide between the garden of surrender and the fire of consequence. The fourth taught me that time is a sacred order, a realm of discipline requiring intentional living. The fifth burned with warfare, the reminder that prayer is a weapon, a holiness, a shield, obedience, a sword. The sixth weighed my motives and stripped me of illusions, teaching me that nothing hidden remains harmless. The seventh purified me in fire, demanding surrender instead of performance. The eighth unveiled the tapestry of creation, where every choice shapes destinies unseen. The ninth echoed with the cries of humanity, proving that every prayer becomes power when offered in trust. And the 10th engulfed me in glory, so absolute it revealed both the smallness of my pride and the greatness of my purpose. Now as I stand in this final realm, the realm of reflection before the return, I ask you what the heavens ask me. What will you do with what you have seen? For these visions are not given for wonder but for warfare, not revealed for curiosity but for transformation. You are not called to admire the heavens, you are called to climb them. You are not meant to listen to this revelation as a spectator, but to rise as a participant, a warrior shaped by truth rather than fear. Consider your own life now with the 10 heavens shining behind my words. Where have you settled? Where have you delayed obedience? Where have you allowed complacency to tether your spirit to the lowest realm? You were not created to remain in the first heaven, tossed by storms of distraction. You were not made to dwell near the second, tormented by temptation and compromise. You were not meant to wander at the edges of Eden, half belonging to the garden and half to your wounds. No, you were created to rise, to ascend, to reflect the glory of the one enthroned above every heaven. And the path upward is not mystical. It is practical. It is daily surrender, daily discipline, daily prayer, daily battle, daily repentance, daily courage. The heavens do not open for the curious, they open for the committed. And so I place before you the challenge that echoes from every realm I crossed. Awakens, repent, rise, fight, surrender, pray, obey, align, intercede, ascend. Let your life become a declaration of war against darkness. Let your choices become weapons forged in obedience. And let your thoughts become altars where holiness is kindled. Let your prayer become fire that pierces every realm. Do not tell yourself you are too weak. Heaven does not call the strong but makes the willing strong. Do not tell yourself it is too late. Time bends for those who walk in surrender. Do not tell yourself your battles are unseen. Every struggle you face is felt in the ninth heaven. Do not tell yourself God is distant. His throne burns closer than your breath. The heavens are calling you upward. And the Spirit now places one question into your hands like a sword. Will you rise? For the journey does not end here. It begins with your decision. The ascent is your calling, your destiny, your blueprint for victory. Step into it with fire. And let the world see the radiance of a soul that has walked through the heavens and returned transformed